It's been almost 3 years since the inception of AEW, and since then, its fans have lauded it as the greatest thing to ever happen to professional wrestling. Maybe ever. The WWE had a monopoly, a stranglehold on the professional wrestling industry, and AEW gave us an opportunity to break out and see something that we didn't get to see on WWE television weekly. AEW has provided wrestling fans with interesting stories and hard-hitting in-ring action. However, even though that they're new, and even though they're giving wrestling fans a lot of what they want, it doesn't stop wrestling fans from being completely insufferable about AEW and their product. The fact that AEW does listen to their fans at times still doesn't make the product infallible. There's been a lot of things that AEW has done since their inception that a lot of fans don't give them enough grief about, especially when almost the same thing happens on the other channel. AEW is doing an excellent job as of right now in a lot of respects, but they are failing in some. In this video, I'm going to highlight some of the things that AEW has not done well and how wrestling fans have continually defended them, despite the fact that if this happened on the other channel, we'd be complaining on Twitter. Christian Cage, current Impact Heavyweight Champion of the World. Remember when the Forbidden Door opened? Oh, the Forbidden Door. We've gotten a lot of great things from the Forbidden Door, which has mostly just been Moxley wrestling people from Japan. And that's not a bad thing, don't get me wrong, because the Forbidden Door just wasn't open to New Japan Pro Wrestling. The Forbidden Door has also been open to Impact. I know it's a TNA logo, let's just pretend. This is an older shirt. Anyway, the current Impact champion is Christian Cage. You know, the guy who won the title from the former Impact Heavyweight Champion, Kenny Omega. You know, the guy with the belt collector gimmick who took the World Heavyweight Championship from Rich Swann. So a lot of people said that Rich Swann wasn't the greatest Impact Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, and maybe that's the case. But he was still Impact through and through, signed to a contract to Impact and wrestled exclusively for the company on television. AEW entered into the Forbidden Door with Impact, and all of a sudden Impact became secondary to AEW. Their World Tag Team Champions, the Good Brothers, were featured more on AEW television than they are on Impact television. And Impact's Heavyweight Championship, along with the TNA Championship, were both won in one match by an AEW contracted wrestler. Now, none of these things would be that big of a deal, except for the fact that a lot of people who balked at the Forbidden Door immediately said, this is no way to help Impact. But to that point, a lot of people said that AEW would not be so short-sighted and they would make the guy who dethroned Kenny Omega into a made man in Impact and make Impact even better than it was before AEW had their relationship with them. And then Kenny Omega lost the Impact World Heavyweight Championship to an AEW contracted wrestler. Now, I'm not saying that in the future, whoever maybe defeats Christian Cage could be a bigger star in Impact than he was before. But the fact of the matter is that was the one sole defense that every single AEW fan had for an AEW contracted wrestler to win that championship. Oh, it's okay. Kenny Omega's going to get somebody else so over. That guy was Christian, the one man who's pinned Kenny Omega since he's had the belt collector gimmick. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but an Impact Wrestling Heavyweight Champion currently contracted to AEW doesn't do anything great for Impact. As a matter of fact, the whole Forbidden Door has been great for AEW and has been lackluster for every other promotion. They already had cross-promotion ties with Moxley, so Moxley going over to Japan wasn't anything out of the ordinary. It had nothing to do with the Forbidden Door, it had everything to do with the provisions in Moxley's contract. The same provisions that, from what we understand, were put into Bryan Danielson's contract, where Bryan Danielson will get to wrestle in Japan, but he would still be an AEW contracted talent. None of this benefits Japan except for the odd dream matches they end up getting, because they can't build stories with guys like Mox and Bryan Danielson because they're AEW contracted talent, and that comes first. So at this point, it just seems like the Forbidden Door was just a catchy phrase for AEW to say, hey, we're going to take some talents from other promotions, put them on our show. We might give them a little bit, but for the most part, it's for us and no one else. WWE recently did a pay-per-view called Extreme Rules, where the main event was Finn Balor, the Demon, versus Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns would win that match when Finn Balor would stand on the top rope ready for his coup de grace, and the rope would break and Finn Balor would fall to the mat. Before anyone knew anything, they were already talking about how this was one of the worst endings in the history of pro wrestling. I can't believe they would do this to the Demon. I can't believe that they wouldn't have a straight finish. Even though if the Demon got pinned straight, everybody would be mad about the fact that Roman, again, is just beating everybody in his way. But I digress. But the Demon was a big selling point for this pay-per-view. And Roman Reigns beating him clean would just destroy the Demon. So instead, they went with a different way to try to make it interesting. And what did everyone do? Everyone on the internet crapped all over it. Now, normally, why would I bring this up in a video about AEW? Maybe that's because when AEW ended one of their most anticipated deathmatch pay-per-views with something that looked like a fireworks display that a 6-year-old would put on for his neighbors, AEW fans immediately defended it. Oh, let's go back to that Forbidden Door thing for 1 second, because AEW didn't just sit there and go, hey, our bad, we messed up, that wasn't what we expected it to be. No, they worked it into an angle. What was the angle? Blaming the company that they are working with, Impact Wrestling, for providing the pyrotechnics for that death match. So instead of promoting the Forbidden Door, they actually just kicked it closed, poured some gasoline on it, lit it on fire, and blamed all the issues that AEW had on the promotion that they're working with. Now, even if this is just a gimmick, it still makes the Impact Wrestling look so much more less than already that AEW already took its world champion, but now it's being blamed for AEW's problems? But the biggest issue was that wrestling fans immediately said, we're gonna give them a pass, this is something they couldn't practice, they didn't know this was gonna happen, that was horrible, they'll come up with an explanation, it's okay, it's not a big deal, AEW won't let us down. How many times are we going to say that AEW isn't going to let us down before when AEW inevitably lets us down, we can start counting that into the tally of saying, hey, this was something I didn't like. Now, this video isn't to crap all over AEW, it's more to crap all over its fans. And that's immediately what we see all the time whenever we talk ratings on Twitter. Do yourself a favor and pull up wrestling Twitter and see anything where ratings are talked about. We're already seeing the same wrestling fans that ripped apart WWE for having most of their ratings in the 1.8 to 2.5 million range talk about how it's a letdown and a drop-off in some of the worst ratings ever, but then praise AEW for having less ratings. Now I understand, AEW is a new company, and less people have had access to it, and a lot less people know who AEW is than they do WWE, because WWE is the standard bearer of professional wrestling. As a matter of fact, when I went to AEW Dynamite, and I put up on my Snapchat AEW and just the entryway, my sister texted me and said, is this new? What does that stand for? Albert Entertainment Wrestling? Now, my sister's not a wrestling fan whatsoever, but it does prove that AEW has some things to do as it pertains to making sure that they can gather a bigger audience. In a lot of ways, AEW has tried to do that by going after ex-WWE stars that they feel can make a big dent and bring other people over. They've already brought in legends like Sting, CM Punk, and Christian Cage, and bona fide legends of today like Malachi Black, Bryan Danielson, and Adam Cole. AEW's trying to gather as many wrestling fans as they possibly can to watch their show, which is exactly what they should do. But when AEW announced Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega at Grand Slam, the wrestling world erupted and said it was the greatest decision that anyone's ever made. And then got mad when the WWE announced that they were going to do the Bloodline versus the New Day. Now, there are multiple reasons why the internet melted down about this. First and foremost, they said that the WWE shouldn't be giving away a pay-per-view level match on free TV. To which my response always is, why wouldn't you want to see that? Who cares what the build is? Let them worry about that. If you're going to get a main event caliber match on free television, take it. That's not a bad thing. Also, AEW put on the dream match of dream matches on free TV, and everybody said it was the greatest idea ever. Well, there's wrestling fans in a nutshell for you. Finally, this leads to the debate of sports entertainment versus pro wrestling. The one thing that AEW says that they have above every other wrestling company is that they are true pro wrestling. And that may ring true in a lot of different tropes. But let's not pretend that they're not also sports entertainment. The WWE has made things that seem abnormal more normal under the guise of sports entertainment. You can't sit there and call AEW a pure wrestling company when they have a zombie wrestler, when they have a dinosaur wrestler, a wrestler that just keeps his hands in his pants and doesn't speak. That is sports entertainment. And that's not a bad thing. Just like the Mimosa Mayhem matches aren't bad things. Just like Video game arcade matches aren't bad things, just like Les Dinner Debonair aren't bad things. But don't sit there and crap all over WWE and say, I don't watch that sports entertainment crap, AEW is the greatest thing in the world, when AEW also does things that are sports entertainment based. It's okay to like both, or dislike both, or like one and not the other. To rip on one company for one thing, and then praise another company for doing the exact same thing, makes you just seem like you're a mark for one company. If that's the case, stop watching WWE. At one point, WWE put the World Tag Titles on Murphy and Rollins, and all AEW fans did was rip WWE apart for putting the tag titles on a makeshift tag team, even though AEW just put their tag titles on a makeshift tag team of Kenny Omega and Adam Hangman Page. Now remember, people can sit there and say, well, they're in the Elite. Adam Page left the Elite before this whole thing happened. Well, they teamed up before that. So, Seth Rollins and Murphy were in the same group. It would make sense as to why they would vie for the tag titles. Well, Seth Rollins already had a tag team in their stable. The Elite already had the Young Bucks. Now, I understand that this could be a part of a bigger story, but the knee-jerk reaction was, let's complain about what the WWE did here, meanwhile AEW did the exact same thing. There are many things about both companies that should be celebrated. There are also many things about both companies that should be critiqued. And the WWE isn't free of being criticized, but neither should AEW. The fact that they've only been around for a couple of years and are already making mistakes shows that there are growing pains, and they're going to learn and get better and do better as a company. But that's only going to happen if the fans are fair and tell AEW what they don't like about their product so they stop doing those things. The real reason for this video, at the end of the day, is just me telling everyone, hey, enjoy what you like. Be happy when wrestling shows give you what you want. And stop complaining about things you don't like. Just stop watching them. This has been Albert Albanese on the Slam Sessions. See you guys later.